That's a damn fine game. When I was 12 years old, I was a huge fan of G4 TV. X-Play had a mini-series tucked into the show called Splinter Cell Co-op Theater, where they used Splinter Cell Chaos Theory's multiplayer mode, created two characters named Bob and Steve, and documented their exploits in espionage. It was hilarious, and I loved it so much that I had to buy Chaos Theory as soon as I got my hands on an original Xbox. However, I quickly learned that stealth games are pretty difficult, and my middle school mind was quickly discouraged from thinking I would ever get past the second mission. As a result, I shelved the game and never returned to the franchise. Despite my frustration, I always thought Chaos Theory was one of the defining games in the stealth genre, so I held onto my copy of the game all this time. Thanks to Xbox's backward compatibility support, being a mild pack rat has served me well, and my Series X can play the game without any issues. With the recent announcement that Ubisoft is making a new Splinter Cell, I thought I should revisit Chaos Theory to see why many regard it as the franchise's high watermark. Grab your Airwaves chewing gum and squeeze into that MK5 tack suit, soldier. We have guards to choke out. The name of the game is Stealth. Well, it's actually Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, but not getting caught is the goal. As Sam Fisher, the player must head out from the insertion point, complete their objectives, and make it to the extraction point without tripping alarms or being seen by the many wandering guards roaming the premises. To get through levels undetected, I found myself mostly lurking in the shadows, paying close attention to the meter that informs me of how much light I'm exposed to, and trying to find clever ways to lure enemies toward my direction. That way, I could dispose of them quickly and, most importantly, quietly. Oddly enough, Chaos Theory features a dedicated whistle button for this very tactic, but I found I would look for light switches or use the optically channeled potentiator, or OCP, attached to my sidearm to cause lights and electronics to temporarily malfunction. While enemies were investigating, I'd get the flank on them, paying close attention to the meter that displays how much noise I'm making, and either knock them out or grab them and pull them into a dark corner for an impromptu interrogation. Interrogating enemies provides the player with little bits of information, either in regards to the mission at hand or the environment. Sometimes I'd get tipped off about who was running the operation, or was notified about a nifty medkit in the next room. Either way, if I had the opportunity to interrogate an enemy, I took it. After an interrogation, you have two choices: choke the guard unconscious, or knock them out with a blow to the back of the head. The former is a lot quieter than the latter, so I opted for the rear naked choke 9 times out of 10. The player is then given another choice. Do I drop the enemy and leave them out in the open, or do I attempt to hide the body? More times than not, I simply drop them in the dark area that I dragged them to, but occasionally, I would hide them under a set of stairs or in an underground passage. I typically did this after a roaming guard I hadn't noticed found the body, tripped the alarm, and caused me to load my quick save. There was a bit of trial and error in the first 2 missions while I figured out how these stealth systems were implemented, but I have to admit, I save scum my way through this entire game. While I see the merit in the game's lack of checkpoints, I would have appreciated a no checkpoints option in the settings. That way the default setting could include checkpoints and I wouldn't have to pause periodically to quick save. A one-time selection is a lot less annoying than pausing to save all the time, but I digress. Each mission ends with a scorecard where you are graded for your stealthy abilities and for completing your objectives. Your grade decreases when you use lethal force, being seen, or tripping alarms in general. To preserve your score, you would ideally complete all your objectives without killing anyone, unless ordered to, and never being caught. This encouraged me to not run around guns blazing pretending I was playing Rainbow Six Vegas 2. I wasn't necessarily going for perfect missions either. It's just that the game's multi-level alert system made the game increasingly difficult each time the guards were alerted to my presence by equipping them with helmets and bulletproof vests, which made the prospect of the emergency headshot with a silenced pistol to eliminate a guard no longer an option. I feel like the AI for the guards and the way the maps are designed to present enough challenges on their own. When you consider Sam's prowess in the shadows combined with his loadouts, I think everything is balanced appropriately. I don't have much experience with the stealth genre, but I found Chaos Theory's stealth mechanics challenging, competent, and fun, despite the learning curve. That being said, Sam can't rely on the shadows and his rear naked choke to complete every mission, and that's where his equipment comes into play. We're not just here to incapacitate targets and leave undetected, we're also acquiring intel on the enemy, and sometimes the guards aren't privy to the dealings of their employers. This means we have to use our gadgets to dig up the information that the boss wants to keep under wraps. One doesn't simply think about Splinter Cell and not think about the iconic 3 green lights emitted from the multi-vision goggles our hero wears. Not only do these goggles sport night vision, they also feature thermal vision, electromagnetic field vision, and electronically enhanced vision. Night vision is pretty self-explanatory, and with the amount of time spent in the shadows, I had night vision on for most of the game. Where things get a little more interesting are moments when your vision is obstructed by tents or cloth-covered doorways, and thermal vision can be used to see if there is a warm body on the other side. Electromagnetic field vision shows interference given off by an electronic device. This comes in handy when looking for computers to hack or light switches in a dark room. Electronically enhanced vision allows the player to remotely hack into computers to read emails or even view the live feeds from the building's security cameras. However, the goggles aren't X-ray specs, and walls are where they meet their match, but that's where the trusty optic cable makes an appearance. To prevent you from blindly walking through a doorway, you can size up the next room by approaching the door and feeding the optic cable underneath, allowing you to peer around the room and strategize a plan for whatever may be waiting on the other side. The gadgets Sam carries with him aid him tremendously in completing his missions, but sometimes they're not enough, and that's when the heavy artillery comes out. During the briefings for each mission, we're provided intel from a series of friendly operatives. These briefings typically end with Sam's field runner, William Redding, advising the player on the weapons needed for the task at hand. Before a mission, you're given the choice of stealth, assault, or Redding's recommendation for loadouts, and I pick the latter every time. I figured that I didn't want to be pigeonholed into stealth if a mission took a turn for the worse. Although, I mostly stealthed my way through the environments and maybe used the assault weapons a handful of times when firefights broke out and I was given the green light to go loud. Despite often being discouraged from killing guards, Sam is provided a suppressed SC-20K assault rifle featuring a modular assault weapon system which enables him to make use of a GL-1 multi-purpose grenade launcher, as well as a shotgun attachment or a long-range barrel for taking out guards from a considerable distance. Sam can use the rifle to deploy less than lethal ammunition and devices, such as ring airfoil projectiles that stun and immobilize targets, sticky cameras that cling to floors and walls, and sticky shocker rounds that electrocute targets, knocking them out immediately. There's also the SC pistol, which comes equipped with an even more effective suppressor, and the OCP I mentioned before. This device emits an electromagnetic pulse that can temporarily disable lights, computers, cameras, and turrets. This sidearm was my best pal while playing Chaos Theory. If I got frustrated trying to stealth past a guard and loaded my save one too many times, the SC pistol came out and put an end to the issue. There are also wall mines, frag grenades, smoke grenades, and flashbangs, which are pretty self-explanatory but are also not very subtle. I found myself stealthing through most encounters and trying my best to grab guards to choke them out and hide them in dark corners of rooms. But as I got into some of the later missions, I saw the merit in using airfoil rings and sticky shockers. The missions predictably scale in difficulty as the game goes on, and although it's a fun challenge to show firearm restraint, I found myself using more of the equipment as I saw necessary. While I think some people may feel that there's not enough equipment at Fisher's disposal, I enjoyed the creativity brought about by the limited equipment. Finding new uses for equipment in the late game was a fun surprise and speaks to the design of the game's sandbox. But the tools in the sandbox wouldn't be any fun without a playground, and that brings us to our next topic. Espionage is often an international affair, and that fact is no different for Sam Fisher or his missions. This brings our globetrotting spy to locales like Peruvian lighthouses, cargo ships on the Pacific Ocean, Panamanian banks, New York City penthouses, private estates in Japan, and more. While there aren't many levels, I feel like each of them were unique and had a charm of their own. The Lighthouse mission has got to be one of the most iconic levels of all time. It's atmospheric, challenging, and incredibly designed. If it's intended to be a tutorial of sorts, it succeeds in being one of the most beautifully crafted tutorial missions I've ever played. It doesn't hold the player's hand, but instead leaves them to figure it out, which may be obtuse by today's standards, but I appreciate the developers assuming I have the wit to solve it, while also including some great moments to showcase the environmental storytelling this game offers. Whether I was hacking a computer to sneak a peek at a private email, or making my way through a Japanese bathhouse and eavesdropping on a couple of guards, the environmental storytelling in Chaos Theory is interesting and at times really funny. There are even secondary missions that are completed by eavesdropping on conversations that could be missed entirely, but if you take your time to explore the levels, they are a joy to discover. Not only were the locations diverse, but they felt a lot larger than they might actually be, and they're designed incredibly well. I think the deceptive size of the levels has to do with the meticulous nature of the game. While it's not an open world, I think the more modern term, wide linear, applies to Chaos Theory's level design. While the levels are nowhere near as big as the levels in Uncharted 4, Chaos Theory's levels feel similar in structure. The player has agency over how they go about completing their objectives, and being inserted into the area with the freedom to explore and solve the puzzle reminded me of Nathan Drake's final adventure. Outside of some resolution issues and clunky controls, I often forgot I was playing a nearly 17-year-old game. How Sam can interact with the environments is what takes Chaos Theory to the next level. If you're in a tight hallway and a guard is coming, you can face the wall, press Y to jump, and Sam will run up the wall and hold himself near the ceiling where he is out of sight. If you can suspend your disbelief the same way Sam suspends himself in these hallways, this is a really cool way to take out an enemy. You can also bust open doors to knock someone out on the other side, pull enemies over the sides of buildings while you're scaling them, and choke out guards while hanging from an overhead pipe. If I thought I could do it, it was likely that I could, and I was surprised at how well these systems simply worked. While the stealth mechanics and equipment are fun to play around with, the environments are the true standout for me. I can see myself revisiting the game just to make my way through some of the levels again. Also, I'd love to try to get 100% scores on each level. For a game that's as old as it is, I think these levels stand the test of time. I've dabbled in the stealth genre, but for a long time I've always considered myself more a fan of games with stealth elements rather than games where stealth is the focus. That being said, once I got acclimated to Chaos Theory, I found enjoyment in the patience and strategy that was required to complete Sam's missions undetected. I think I finally understand why people are excited by Ubisoft's announcement that a new Splinter Cell game is in development. I think Splinter Cell scratches the tactical espionage itch for players without the over-the-top stories in Metal Gear Solid that some may find distracting. My only concern is that Ubisoft hasn't been hitting home runs for a while now, so color me tentatively excited. I hate to sound negative, but maybe Splinter Cell can dig them out of the creative drought they seem to be in. I look at something like Rainbow Six Extraction and can't help but think Ubisoft have lost the plot. Realism is a strange term for a video game, especially in regards to soldiers and gunplay, but keeping the gameplay experiences grounded in some semblance of reality is their strong suit. I hope that's what Ubisoft is aiming for with the new Splinter Cell. In my opinion, as long as the developers can capture the charisma of Sam Fisher, the rapport he has with his colleagues, have the right mixture of modern and cutting-edge equipment, and design levels that are fun to sneak through, interact with, and are filled with great environmental storytelling, I think people will be happy. I know that sounds like a lot, but I think it's what made Chaos Theory special, and it's what I will be looking for in a new game. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. If there's a stealth game you think I should check out, let me know in the comments below. I've never played any of the Hitman games, and they're coming to Game Pass, so maybe I'll check them out. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel. I have a list of games to finally beat, so more videos like this are on the way. I also make more in-depth retrospectives and review new releases. I host and produce a weekly Nintendo-centric podcast called Me, Myself, and I, where I cover the latest Nintendo news and talk about the games I'm playing on my Switch. I'm just getting started and have no plans of stopping anytime soon. Anyway, I appreciate your time and attention, it means the world to me. Until next time, lead with love and stay hydrated. Thank you.